Thank you for your music.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yep.
Thank you for being in the choir. Awesome.
I let you down last week, but I couldn't help it. Thanks to prednisone. It does wonders for you. Oh, I'm reading to you this morning from the 14th chapter of John, 23rd through the 29th verses, and I'll get it here in there. Jesus answered Judas, who had just made a statement, "Those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words, and the word that you hear is not mine, but is from the Father who sent me. I have said these things to you while I am still with you, but the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you all of what I have said to you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. You heard me say to you, I am going away, and I am coming to you. If you love me, you will rejoice that I am going to the Father, because the Father is greater than I. And I have told you this before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you may believe." May God bless this reading of His holy word. Well, I'm not normally a person who preaches on my speech. Still, I'll drink water. I think that's rude, but anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, Memorial Day, I'm not normally a preacher who does things like on Memorial Day because it's not in the church calendar. But every once in a while, I recall that the church calendar isn't everything. And once in a while, you have to do a special sermon on certain days that would ordinarily not be in the church calendar. And Memorial Day is one of them. And one thing significant for those of us who live in Bedford County, it is the beginning of the season at Smith Mountain Lake. And the Lord has outdone Himself on this weekend as far as the weather is concerned. And I expect those narrow roads out there that lead to the lake and wind around the lake are full of cars towing boats, trailers, and some taking more of the road than they need to. I stay away from down there because I did enough of that when I was traveling back and forth to Franklin County. And the lake itself be full of all sorts of watercraft. And we've been hearing all week about water safety. There'll be bass boats and pleasure boats, pontoon boats, houseboats, jet skis, and who knows what else is out there on that lake. So Memorial Day is certainly a time to celebrate, and I'm quite sure that some of that celebration might involve some tragedies. We pray for those people. Memorial Day during my growing up years was an exciting time. I was a native of Richmond, Virginia, and back during that day and time, we had two Memorial Days. We had a National Memorial Day, and we had I guess I can mention that name in church, Confederate Memorial Day. As I recall the parades that we had in Richmond, and I mean we had some parades in Richmond, was on the Confederate Memorial Day. And that was because, Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. And, a lot of stuff went on for a long time that related back to that tragic time in our nation's history. And the Memorial Day celebration got started by some Southern belles who decided that somebody needed to honor the war dead of the Civil War, a war in which more soldiers were killed than in any other war this nation has been engaged in. Anyway, they decided that they needed to lay flowers on those graves. And when they did it, they not only laid flowers on the graves of rebel soldiers, but also on Union soldiers. For a long time, you would see rebel flags on graves and cemeteries of veterans of the Confederate War. Terrible time. But anyway, you'd find maybe dozens and dozens of them. And I guess can't hardly imagine seeing it now, but lo and behold, when I was going down Longwood Avenue on Friday, I saw 2 Confederate flags in the Elk Cemetery. And I was really surprised to see that. We had a man in Snow Creek that every Memorial Day and every Veterans Day, he went out and put American flags on every person out there who was a veteran. You don't see that much anymore. And he passed away, so we didn't see that at Snow Creek. I don't think anybody did it again this year. Anyway, terrible time. My great-grandfather on my grandmother's side was a Civil War soldier. And I mean, I understand he was a diehard. He had this huge, huge Confederate flag that he would hang on the front porch at the house there on Northside Avenue. And anybody came by, he saw somebody coming by, he'd yell that rebel yell, whatever it was. I don't think anybody knows what it was. But anyway, he was a guidon bearer in the Civil War and served some unit out in the Valley area. But anyway, he died when I was born, so I never got to meet this character. And I had his flag for years, until finally being in the attic, in the basement, wherever, it just simply disintegrated. So I don't have not even a piece of that anymore. As a junior high schooler, middle school for you people who live in this day and time, I marched in a lot of those parades and continued to do so when I was in the John Marshall High School cadet band. And it was a really exciting time. It was some kind of, I don't really know much about Richmond, but that parade started east of the Medical College of Virginia and ended at the Fairgrounds, which is the ballpark now. And I'll tell you, that was a long walk, but it was exciting. And you just got little goosebumps on you when you marched down that street. Well, anyway, just Memorial Day was an exciting time. And I still like parades. Don't go to Christmas one because it's too cold, but I sure will be down that Saturday to see the one that we have here in this town. I just love it. Get kind of lumps in my throat whenever I see a parade. Well, thus, it's a time to honor who gave their lives in defense of their country. And that honor is well deserved. There have been so many wars or police actions or whatever you can remember. I can't remember them all in my 84 years. And there are some of you probably remember all of them. But the war to end all wars was World War I. And everybody thought peace bound to come. And guess what? It did. World War II came about. And probably because of the anger of the German people, the way they were treated after World War I. Not a good reason to start a war, but anyway. World War II was where so many young men and women lost their lives, and especially tragic for this community on D-Day. And we still have a lot of celebrating here on D-Day. And from what I understand, this is the last time they're going to honor them. And I have a doubt about that. But anyway. Then after World War II, we got into the Korean War. They didn't call it a war, they called it a police action. And then there was the Vietnam War, where the veterans were somewhat less than honored. And then there was Iraq and a bunch of others that I don't remember their names. And now we're at a war where we can't even identify the enemy very definitely because we're at war with terrorism. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. Now, where I'm going to do church stuff. Even though the main purpose of Memorial Day is to honor those who gave their lives for their country, there is, for me personally, a driving desire to think and gloat about peace. And not only to think about peace, but to look at the fact that early Christians did not do battle. They did not take up arms against the Roman Empire. They did not shed one drop of blood to maintain their survival. They gave their lives gladly for this peace of Christ that he promised. And it wasn't until a whole lot later, that Christians decided to persecute non-Christians, and they hung them and they stretched them and they did all kinds of things to get them to confess their faith in Jesus Christ. Well, that seems to me that the best way we can honor our war dead would to have a cease for all wars, no matter what it takes. But I believe that as long as there is greed, as long as there's bigotry, as long as there is bias, as long as there's hate, as long as there's vengefulness, and a lot of other things, there is not going to be any peace in the world in the sense we normally think of. And for me, in order to initiate any kind of peace, it has to start with the individual. It has to start with me. It has to start with you. In this sense, peace becomes a very personal issue. In the New Testament, there are a slew of scriptures about peace. It takes up about 2 pages in the concordance of the Bible, and both from Old Testament and New Testament. But in the New Testament, because we're New Testament people, in the New Testament, the first and important proclamation was that proclamation outside of Bethlehem on the hillside to those shepherds, where the angels sang to them or proclaimed to them peace on earth and goodwill to all people. In the fourth gospel, in the 14th chapter of John that I just read, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give as the world gives. And that's a little bit significant too. Talk about that a little later. In the 20th chapter of John, Jesus says twice to his disciples following his resurrection, peace be with you. In Paul's letter to the Philippians, he writes, and the peace of God which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Jesus Christ. Now, this peace that we read so much about in the Bible, it comes from the old Hebrew greeting shalom. And the Greek word that is used for peace in the New Testament is irene. And it's spelled a little different than irene, But anyway, it had, for the most part, a very broad meaning. And part of it was like the absence of war or conflict, but it also had another kind of meaning that I think is what Christ was talking about. I use a lot of translators' guides when I do my sermon preparation. And a translator's guide talks about how you translate specific words and sentences and things like that. And I love those things. It gives you some different insight. And normally what they do in that translator's guide is that they look at other languages and see how that has to be interpreted in other language when the language doesn't have the same kind of words our language has. So in my translator's guide, one of the authors wrote, the closest equivalent in some language would be like, I cause you to have a quiet heart. Or I cause you to have joy from within. And my favorite one, or I cause you just simply to have well-being. So those kind of translations and those kind of approaches give us a sort of a little bit different direction when it comes to talk about peace. And I think that's a little bit what Jesus was talking about when he says, I do not give it as the world gives. Because essentially the peace that Jesus is talking about, the peace that he is giving to us, is a full sense of well-being, resting on our utter confidence in Him and in God Himself. And according to Scripture, this peace is incomprehensible. So how in the world can we practice a peace that we can't grasp a meaning for? And maybe it's incomprehensible because we just not have, neither the disciples have not yet gotten it. We really don't know what it means. It's a peace that's an inner peace. and an inner strength that comes from our strong belief and our strong confidence in Jesus and what He taught us. And being at peace with ourselves is the first step to peace on earth. And nothing, this peace within ourselves, nothing upsets that particular apple cart. So for me, Memorial Day has a two-pronged remembrance. We remember the sacrifices that so many made in service to our country. And it's remembering that elusive peace that Christ offers us. Maybe some here this morning have never made a public confession of faith. Maybe some here this morning are looking for a new church home. Maybe some are